From knocks on walls and footsteps to shadows seen walking in halls. No one really knows what happens after we pass away. But these nursing home workers all know one thing: that not everyone who passes away leaves for good. Have you ever experienced anything strange in a nursing home? If so, please leave it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe if you're new. So please sit back and enjoy 5 true nursing home stories. Experiences in a nursing home I used to work at. I used to work graveyard shift in a nursing home in Texas, and there were 3 occasions that I saw what I consider to be shadow figures. Nothing scary happened, but it's the only location I've been at where I've had personal paranormal experiences. Incident 1. Background. Maybe a week or 2 before this occurred, a man passed away suddenly after waking up and following his normal routine. He went from getting himself dressed and going for his daily walk, and after having 1 coffee, in the time it took him to ask for another cup and it being made for him, he suddenly stopped breathing and was gone. Story. During normal work duties, I saw a completely black head peek around a corner and then go back to being obscured by the walls. There were no noises associated with anyone leaving a room or anyone walking down the hall. And when I went to investigate the hall where the man peered around the corner of, there was no one there. The man that suddenly passed away lived in a room down the hallway that the head peeked around the corner from, and I've always felt that it was him still being present when that happened. Incident 2. Working graveyard shift, we did some housekeeping duties since lots of people slept through the night, and I guess they wanted to give us something to do. So I was dusting around the TV, and I saw a human shadow walk behind a couch reflected in the TV. Again, no sounds of a resident opening the door, so at this point, everyone was in their rooms sleeping. I assumed it was my co-worker, since I hadn't seen her in a little while, so figured she was doing some cleaning in another area. A few minutes later, while I was still dusting, she came out of the area where we do laundry, so clearly it wasn't her. Again, there was no resident up because the walk that I saw was completely fluid, and not one resident was physically able to walk like the figure I saw reflected. It was like someone in their 20s with no physical difficulties walked, and again there was no color reflected in the TV. It was fully black, like a walking shadow. That one unsettled me a bit. Incident 3. There was a woman who we knew was passing away. Our duty with her was to keep her clean and as comfortable as we could while she was in the process of passing. That night, I saw through the window of the nurse's station a pure white shadow walk one way down the hall the woman was living on who was in the process of passing away. Then I saw the figure walk the other way down the hall. I then saw the figure walk the first way down the hall again. To this day, I don't know why that figure was white when the first 2 figures I saw were black, but I like to think it was the woman's guardian angel of some kind, staying with her or waiting for her to pass to take her to the afterlife. After moving to Mississippi and getting jobs here, I have had no more paranormal experiences, so there must have been a high level of energy at that place in Texas. It was a fairly new facility, so maybe that had something to do with stirring up some energies. Thanks to anyone who read my experiences. I like to talk about my experiences with anyone interested. I lived in a nursing home. When I was 15, I lived in a nursing home. My mum worked there. At the time, we were living in an already haunted home that was falling apart. I've posted about it on here before. We had to move out fast, and my mum was close with the owner of the facility that she worked at. The owner knew about our situation and offered for us to stay at the facility. There was an entire wing of rooms that had not been used in years. It was kept clean, but no one stayed in it. The owner of the facility told my mum that we could have the last 2 rooms at the end of the hallway, across from each other. The doors to the wing were big, heavy ones that were really loud when they were being used. The staff and the residents didn't use this wing because there was nothing in there for anyone. It was just rooms with beds. Things were fine for a while. The only thing that I felt for the first few months there was that our wing never felt empty. The walk down to our rooms felt creepy. It just felt like there were people looking at you. The first small thing that happened was, one night my little sister and I were goofing off with my mum's phone while she was working. We were recording ourselves talking and making silly sounds. At one point, I had the phone recording, but my sister and I were silent. We didn't know what to do or say anymore. So I stopped recording. The next day, we went through all the recordings so we could hear how funny we sounded. I forgot about the last recording having no sound, and I played it. It was silent for a second, and then we heard a sound that was like someone drawing in a deep breath. We were shocked and really scared. The next thing that happened really scared me. It was nighttime and my mum was working. My sister was across the hall, sleeping, and I was watching TV. It was a normal night, nothing out of the ordinary, when all of a sudden, the door to the room I was in started getting pounded on so heavily, it sounded like the door was going to bust down. I was startled and said, "Hello?" No one answered. As the pounding was going on, the door handle started shaking, like someone was trying to get in. Mind you, I always left the door unlocked in case my sister woke up and needed me for anything. The pounding on the door was so violent and loud, I was afraid it was going to wake my sister across the hall. As it got louder and harder, I got scared, so I went and hid in the bathroom that was in the room. While I was in there listening to the ruckus, I thought, wait, if someone came into the wing, I would have heard the doors open and latch shut. I knew then that there was no way there was an actual person banging on the door like that. It went on for about 5 minutes, and then it stopped abruptly. I was shaken, but went out into the hallway to see if there were dents in the door. There wasn't, and there was no one out there either. I went to check on my sister, as she was sound asleep. I went out and asked the staff if they had heard anything coming from our wing, and they said they hadn't. I even asked a resident if they had somehow gotten into our wing, and they told me that everyone was in bed and accounted for. I knew it wasn't a resident. There was no way any of them could have pounded on the door that violently. Nothing ever happened again while we lived there, luckily. I worked in an old hospital that was turned into a nursing home. If you saw my previous post about my dad working at this hospital, this is what I experienced working here as a CNA. My shift would start at 2 p.m. and was supposed to end at 11 at night. However, if I had to train the girl on nights, that meant I had to stay until 4:30 in the morning. Being a nurse tech is hard work, so you'd imagine by 2 or 3 in the morning I was tired and sleep deprived. One night, I was working a long shift. We did rounds every hour. As we were going through, a resident requested the nurse. So we told the nurse she was wanted. Now, since we just did rounds, that means we checked on all residents. Typical night, they were all sleeping. We went back to the nurse's station and sat down. The nurse still in the same resident's room, talking low. Very abruptly and loud, we heard the loudest baby cry. One of those cries where a mother just knows something was wrong. I shot up out of my chair and immediately tried to follow where we heard it. Odd thing, it came from everywhere. It didn't echo from hall to hall. It sounded as if the same noise came from all 3 halls surrounding us. I ordered my co-worker to check patients again. No change. Everyone slept. I thought I was in denial and kept asking my co-worker if she heard the same thing, and she agreed she did. We waited until the nurse came out of the resident's room to ask if she heard it, and she did too, but didn't know how to react, being she was with a resident and didn't want to freak them out. That place used to be a regular hospital with a morgue at the very bottom floor. Many nurses hated working nights due to the weird experiences they encountered. I'll never forget that blood-curdling baby cry, nor can I explain it.
This is what happens in a nursing home at night. A long story. Too long didn't read at the end. For the first 2 years after graduating nursing school, I have worked in this nursing home. The things I have experienced in my night shifts have made me believe in the paranormal. I will share my experiences with you. Some are about patients that have recently passed, and a story about a poltergeist haunting me at work. Background. This nursing home itself is only 20 years old and quite modern. There is a large tree yard with all kinds of fruit trees, and there is some water surrounding the property. The nursing home houses around 100 patients. All of these patients have dementia in the later stages of the disease. Because of this, many of the patients die within the nursing home. Our job as caretakers is to make their life as enjoyable as possible and bring comfort to the last stage of their lives. An older male patient of my ward developed pneumonia and died within a few days. This man was not able to speak much anymore because he lost the ability to do that. The only thing he could say was, "Who can help me?" in a very distinct voice. About 5 days later, I had my first of 4 night shifts. A message appeared on my pager that a sensor detected movement in another room at the end of the hallway. When I went to take care of the patient that probably needed to take a pee, I walked by the room of the deceased male. When I crossed his door, I heard him call in his distinct voice, "Who can help me?" Not being able to think very fast, I planned to take a look at what was going on after I helped the patient from my pager. A few minutes later, I stood within the now empty door from which the deceased called out. Only then I remembered he was to be cremated the next day. Chills went down my spine when I realized. After this experience, I studied a bit about the paranormal. Many of my more experienced night shift colleagues told me they have experienced similar events. I also got told about a probable poltergeist who resided in another ward in a more abandoned room. A few months went by where the occasional feeling of being followed occurred. I also have had an experience where the temperature around me would drop and I was suddenly freezing. I later found out that this could mean that there is a ghost present. We had 2 house cats that were always fighting each other in the hallways. Besides that, they are sweet and cuddly pets who spend a lot of time being loved and petted by the patients. These cats would sit at the doors of patients that were dying. They did not make any noise. They just sit there waiting. Sometimes they even tried to sneak into the room of the terminal patient and would then sit on their bed. After a few months, I transferred to the ward with the probable poltergeist. The feeling of being followed occurred more frequently, and in this ward, I had a lot more paranormal experiences. When a patient had died, it occurred to me that bed sensors would go off randomly in the rooms of the patients. This was frequent to happen after patients died and lasted until they were either buried or cremated. This happens within 7 days here in the Netherlands. My understanding and interest about the paranormal grew, and the more I knew, the more obvious things would happen. Within 1 month, I experienced another situation, like the first experience I described. A patient with a distinctive cry died due to illness. She shared a room with another female. When I went to check on the other woman, she was deeply asleep. When I was about to close the door to the room, the distinctive crying of the deceased woman filled the room. This went on for about 5 seconds. Then it just stopped, and it was quiet again. Now about the poltergeist that I mentioned. The room that he inhabits has the number 3, which has something to do with evil spirits or demons, according to the show Ghost Adventures. The room was used in times where the nursing home was full with patients to house the terminal ill. A lot of patients died there. The rooms kind of fell out of commission when the demand for nursing home beds went down. People that were dying could be nursed in their own room since there was no longer a waiting list for new patients. The poltergeist would follow me around the ward if I passed the room. When I got an uneasy feeling about being followed, I knew it was there. Sometimes it would make my emotions go from really angry to being sad to the point I had to fight not to cry. As a young male, this is totally not normal to me. At some point, the sensor of that room would go off, even when there is no one there, and the sensor was not even activated. I never had the guts to go into that room alone, and I always asked for backup. A lot of my regular night shift colleagues knew what went on in that room/ward and would be very helpful. Sometimes noise came from that room. Sounds like small knocks on doors or walls were regular. I once heard something scratch the inside of the door. There was one time that I saw a figure standing in the window of room number 3. The figure appeared human, but it was just plain black, even darker than the darkness in the empty room. This experience really freaked me out. There was one colleague in particular that I would share my experiences with. She was paranormally gifted, as she could see ghosts and has the ghost of a small boy at her house. She told me that the poltergeist could do nothing to me if I did not let it. The tip I got from her was to speak to the entity and tell it not to bother me, or to leave me alone. This mostly helped. Around the time this happened, a lot of irregular night shift colleagues quit because of this. Using the tip I got from my colleague, the night shifts became more relaxed to me, not being stressed about the poltergeist. The theory that I thought of is that when a patient died, the spirit of the deceased could remain within the nursing home, mostly residing in his or her room or ward. Sometimes they try to make contact with people with the noises of their voice by which they would be acknowledged. They might be confused or scared or have no other place to stay, as this would not happen with every patient. After the moment the deceased were buried or cremated, the spirit can get rest or move on. For the poltergeist, I don't have a theory other than that it was scary as hell to deal with sometimes. I hope you enjoyed reading about my experiences, and I would like to know if any of you might have similar experiences. Have you ever encountered a poltergeist like the one I described? Too long didn't read. The spirits of deceased patients would stay within a nursing home until they were buried or cremated. A poltergeist would haunt me at night, but I learned to deal with it.
Night shift. I'm a male care assistant at a residential home. I've been working night shifts for about 5 months now, and am thoroughly enjoying it, mainly because of the responsibility that comes with the job, and the fact I'm being trusted with it. That said, like pretty much any care home, every single member of staff has their own ghost story, and last night I finally got mine. We managed to get everyone to bed just before 10 p.m, and the night had been unusually quiet. The only exception being the woman in room 15, who would ring to ask to use the commode 8 to 9 times during the night. Around 12, she rang the bell for the 3rd time, and it was my turn to answer the call bell. So I went up to her and sorted things out. While doing this, there were about 4 thuds on the ceiling above. That would be room 30. I had decided to check on everyone while I was upstairs anyway, since that's what we do every 2 hours, and I'd only be coming back up in 10 minutes anyway. But I decided I'd best rush up to 30 in case he had fallen out of bed. That's exactly what I did once 15 was in bed. Luckily, he was in bed, awake, but in bed. I told him it wasn't time to get up yet, and that he should try and get some more sleep, and that I was just checking on him. He asked how he was supposed to sleep if I keep checking on him every 10 minutes. I told him it had been about 2 hours, but he insisted that it had been 10 minutes. I made my way downstairs to the office where my colleague was sitting. She was on the phone ringing out of hours nurses due to an incident with another resident which had happened when I was upstairs. I asked her if she had been into room 30 when I was in 15. She said she hadn't, so I called our manager and explained the possibility of a trespasser and asked for guidance. She said if we thought there was someone else here with us, then we needed to search the building from top to bottom, but chances were it was just John. I asked her who John was, and she said she would explain in the morning, and said goodbye. We searched the building, and sure enough, everything was as it should have been at that time. When the manager came in the next morning, she explained there was a man who lived in the home when she first started, whose name was John Torrance. He used to go sleepwalking during the night, and would scare a lot of the residents by going into their rooms in his sleep. She also said that every now and then you can still hear him sleepwalking on the top floor from the floor below. I still don't know if she was joking or not, but I still don't know how to explain the footsteps. And that was 5 true, scary nursing home stories. I hope you enjoyed them. A big thank you to the Reddit users who allowed me to use their stories for this video. As always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you're new and want to hear more content. If you have any suggestions or requests, or just want to say hi, please feel free to leave a comment below. If you have any stories you'd like me to read, please send them to scarepapa@gmail.com. Thank you very much for watching, and stay safe.